Mathieu Betts is one of the most interesting players on the Detroit Lions roster this offseason. The CFL's reigning Defensive Player of the Year and a 6'4", 250-pound defensive lineman who's coming off of an 18-sack and 3 forced fumble season in the CFL with British Columbia. A player that on paper you would think would be a lock to make a majority of the rosters in the NFL is a player that might not make it to the preseason for the Detroit Lions. And today we're going to take a look at exactly what Mathieu Betts is as a player, his rods and roles of making this roster, and how likely he actually is to be a Detroit Lion in 2024. Now, starting off with Mathieu Betts, you would think that just looking at him on paper, right? A 6'4", 250-pound edge rusher with great burst, good speed, good strength, and is coming off of an 18-sack season. Granted, it was in the CFL, but still, you would look at that guy and say that is a player that would make most rosters. And after his Defensive Player of the Year campaign, that was true for a lot of teams. He had a lot of interest around the NFL with bigger offers from the Green Bay Packers, as well as a number of other places around the league. But he decided to join the Detroit Lions for a significantly smaller contract than what he was offered elsewhere. So a lot of NFL teams had confidence in Betts to make their roster and be impactful, but he decided to go to the Detroit Lions. However, the Lions are in an interesting situation where now Mathieu Betts is competing for a spot that is arguably the most competitive one on the roster, with Aiden Hutchinson, Marcus Davenport, Josh Paschal, James Houston, John Kaminsky, and a number of other players at that position. Mathieu Betts potentially won't even make the active roster come week one, despite his phenomenal 2023 campaign. So, starting off with Mathieu Betts, going a little bit back to know where Mathieu Betts came from, Mathieu Betts started at Laval University in Quebec in 2015. His 2015 season was something to write home about, as in 2015, he led the nation in sacks with 12 sacks in just 8 games as a rookie and was named CFL's most outstanding rookie in 2015. He followed up that Rookie of the Year campaign in 2016 with 9 sacks in 8 games, that being second in the nation, and being awarded the 2016 Most Outstanding Down Lineman Award in the CFL. Now, after that, he continued to have a very, very strong career, taking home awards, winning championships, and being one of the best defensive players in CFL history. Now, Mathieu Betts won 2 Vayner Cups, which is essentially the CFL's version of the national championship, in 2016 and 2018. He took home the Peter Gorman Award in 2015, which is the Rookie of the Year award in college football in Canada. He was a 3-time J.P. Metris Trophy winner, which is the most outstanding defensive lineman in the CFL in 2016, 2017, and 2018. So 3 straight years he won the Best D Lineman Award. And then in 2019, he won the Lewis and Doug Mitchell Award, which is just the best collegiate athlete in Canadian athletics. Across all sports, across all levels, across all schools in Canada, he was awarded the best college athlete in the nation. Now, with that being said, and after a historic CFL career, Mathieu Betts was the 3rd overall selection in 2019 in the CFL draft, as he was drafted by the Edmonton Eskimos with that 3rd overall selection. However, he spent a majority of his first CFL season actually in America, where he spent a preseason with the Chicago Bears before being waived in the preseason and being sent back to Edmonton. Now, Mathieu Betts' career in Edmonton did not go very well. He recorded just 2 sacks there over 3 seasons. Unfortunately, his 2020 season was canceled due to COVID. His rookie season, he put up 2 sacks and a forced fumble with just a couple of tackles. And in 2021, Mathieu Betts did not record a sack for Edmonton. So in the 2022 offseason, he went and transferred. He went and signed to British Columbia, where in 2022, he had a big bounce back season with 7 sacks on the year, which is good, but not necessarily good enough to make that jump back to the NFL. And then in 2023, he exploded onto the scene with 18 sacks and 3 forced fumbles, being named the CFL Defensive Player of the Year, and of course, leading the country in sacks in that statistic. He showed explosiveness, he showed burst, he was a phenomenal athlete, and yeah, even though he was going up against some lesser competition, even though he wasn't necessarily playing up to the NFL standards, he wasn't going against guys like Penei Sewell every week. And honestly, probably didn't even face the level of competition that you would find at a high level Division I school, right? Probably wasn't even facing the talent that you'd find at Alabama or LSU or Michigan or Ohio State. However, I still do believe that his skills will translate to the NFL. I do still think that he brings a lot to the table and is a really interesting prospect. As I said, a really, really good athlete, a big athlete, 6'4", 250 pounds is a good size for an NFL edge rusher. That's about where Romeo Okwara has been for the last couple of years and for a majority of his career. He is fast. His first step is super explosive. He gets off the line really quickly, and he is able to get past offensive tackles almost entirely with his speed, which led to him being a great player in the CFL. He's strong. His bull rush is really, really good. He uses that weight and translates it to power really well. And even though he doesn't have the best bend in the world, he's not as bendy as, say, a James Houston or some of the other players on the Lions roster right now. He is still a player that can get around the edge. He can turn the corner really quickly. And unlike the Detroit Lions a season ago, he has a knack for finishing plays. He's able to turn pressures into sacks. He's able to contain the quarterback and set the edge. And he does a lot of things really, really well for British Columbia a season ago that the Lions are going to ask of their defensive linemen this year. I think another good thing that Betts brings to the table is the CFL obviously runs very different styles of offenses. Their rules are a little bit different. It has a lot more to do with motion. It has a lot more to do with movement and movement before the snap in particular, a lot of movement from the quarterback, and just overall a lot of things to look at and account for from the defensive side of the ball. And I do think that Betts is going to be well equipped to handle bootlegs and play actions in the NFL because of his experience in Canadian football. Now, taking a look at Betts' ability to make this roster. Yesterday, we kind of talked about the roster bubble. We talked about Betts as a football player. We talked about Betts kind of where he fits into this roster. And obviously, he's not going to be a starter. I think a lot of people are saying, oh, 18 sacks a season ago, signed here where, nobody, when other teams wanted him. And they're kind of associating that by saying, oh, he only would have signed here if he knew he was going to start. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I don't think that Brad Holmes or Dan Campbell or Aaron Glenn would have offered Betts a starting role on the defense coming from Canadian football. I think they would have offered him an opportunity. I think they would have said, hey, there is a chance that you could win the starting job here, and we're going to give you that opportunity to compete, which might not be something he was given at other spaces. But I don't think he was being handed the keys to the car based off of just one really exceptional season in the CFL. More likely, he was told, hey, you can come in and you can compete for that edge rushing 2 role. You can compete for a role in this defense. And he saw that the Lions were probably his best opportunity to win football games in the NFL. And that's likely why he decided to come to Detroit over other locations. Now, Mathieu Betts is in a situation where obviously he's not going to start over Aiden Hutchinson. And honestly, I don't think he starts over a healthy Marcus Davenport. Marcus Davenport had, I believe, 8 sacks in 11 games the last time that he was fully healthy for a majority of the year. And ever since entering the league as a first-round selection out of UTSA, he's been a really good pass rusher. He's been very impactful when on the field. And I think when healthy, he is by far the second best edge rusher and the second best defensive end the Detroit Lions have to offer. And I think that it doesn't end there. I don't believe that he is as good of an edge setter as Josh Paschal. I don't think he does a lot of the things nearly as well as Josh Paschal does in the NFL. I think he's more kind of in the realm of a John Kaminsky where, yeah, he's going to get you potentially 4 to 5 sacks in the season in a good year, but that's not a player you're going to start on the boundary. That's not a player you're going to have confidence to play 80, 90% of snaps and be a primary edge rusher across from Aiden Hutchinson. And honestly, I don't think he's even necessarily as strong of a pure pass rusher as, say, James Houston would be in this defense. So he's not as well of an all-around player as Hutchinson or Davenport. I don't think he's as good of a run stuffer as Josh Paschal. I don't think he's as good of a pass rusher as James Houston. And not to mention, he's already 29 years old. He's essentially a 29-year-old rookie coming from what is likely either a low group of 5 school in college football or potentially even an FCS Division II school in college football, just based off of the competition that he had at the CFL level. Now, this isn't all to say that I don't think Mathieu Betts makes the roster. I do think he does. I think that he is already pretty comparable to what Romeo Okwara brought a season ago, to what Julian Okwara or Charles Harris brought a season ago. I think he brings a little more power than Charles Harris. I think he brings a little bit more speed, explosiveness, and bend than Romeo Okwara. And I think he brings a little bit more strength and bull rush than Julian Okwara. I think he is a good member for a depth piece on this defensive line and potentially could be a rotational piece in this defense. But we have to remain honest and we have to remain truthful here. There isn't a high likelihood that Mathieu Betts is the answer. There's not a high likelihood that Mathieu Betts is going to be this standout player, that he's going to put up 10, 12 sacks in the NFL next season, because the reality is he's probably the last defensive lineman to make the active roster. He's probably the last guy who's going to see consistent snaps on the defense. Now, I do think he can be a role player. I do think he could potentially be a good depth option, but I just don't see a reality where he is the edge rusher 2 and the Robin to Aiden Hutchinson's Batman. But with all that being said, that is just my opinion. Of course, let me know down in the comments below how you feel about Mathieu Betts, whether or not you think he makes the active roster, and whether or not you think he actually plays a significant role in this defense. I'd be very curious to hear what you guys have to say and what you guys think about him as a player, a prospect, and as a roster spot. But with all of that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you all so very much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions.